The Ithian research vessel descended through Earth's thick atmosphere, its sleek, silver hull cutting through the clouds like a knife. Dr. Jack Hammond and his team were excited yet cautious, the latter emotion grounded in the reports they had gathered about Earth. This was not just another planet to catalog and observe. It was a living, breathing organism in itself, filled with creatures whose instincts and biological traits bordered on the extreme. Hammond, a seasoned zoologist with decades of field experience across the galaxy, had seen some of the most hostile and dangerous worlds in existence. But Earth was different. He looked out of the viewport, where dense forests and rugged mountains stretched endlessly below. As they neared the ground, the vessel began to emit low-frequency signals to calm the wild creatures that might be disturbed by their presence. But Hammond couldn't shake the sense that this was a world teeming with violence, a place where every species had been crafted to fight, to hunt, to survive, by any means necessary. The ship settled on a small plain surrounded by trees. A team of Ithian field researchers immediately suited up and began unloading equipment. Dr. Hammond's assistant, Asha Juno, stood beside him, scanning the horizon. "I don't like this," she muttered, her voice tense. "It feels like we're walking into a trap." Hammond nodded grimly. "That's the thing about Earth. Every step you take could be your last." They had read reports of humans' strange affinity for dangerous environments. Jungles, deserts, mountains, places where the planet's creatures fought for survival. The paradox was that even with Earth's hazardous conditions, humans seemed to thrive. The team set out on foot, following the path carved out by their scanning drones. The jungle was alive with noise, birds chirping, insects buzzing, and the occasional rustle of something much larger stalking through the undergrowth. Hammond noted the sheer diversity of the wildlife here: camouflaged lizards, enormous insects, and mammals with frighteningly sharp claws. A sudden screech pierced the air, and a large predatory bird shot out from a tree, its talons poised to strike. Hammond instinctively reached for his blaster, but before he could react, a pair of Ithian security guards raised their weapons and fired, causing the bird to veer off course and disappear into the trees. "Well," Hammond said, slightly shaken, "that's one way to make an introduction." As they ventured deeper into the jungle, Hammond realized the animals weren't just surviving here. They were built for violence. Predators used the terrain to their advantage, hiding in the trees or stalking from the shadows. "These creatures have evolved to kill," Hammond muttered under his breath. "Everything here is a weapon, in one way or another." Despite the dangers, the Ithians continued their study, capturing every observation and recording data on Earth's intricate food chains. But the more they learned, the more one fact became undeniable. Earth wasn't just an ordinary planet. It was a world where violence had become a way of life, where evolution had turned the creatures into living weapons. And somewhere, in the midst of it all, were humans, seemingly fragile, yet uniquely dangerous in their own right. Dr. Hammond couldn't help but wonder, was humanity simply another part of this violent ecosystem, or were they something more? The team moved deeper into the jungle, their footsteps muffled by the thick undergrowth. Dr. Hammond remained at the forefront, his eyes darting between the high canopy above and the dense brush below, where shadows moved and unseen creatures watched. The Ithians' advanced equipment allowed them to detect faint signs of life, vibrations in the air, subtle movements beneath the ground. Everything was alive. Everything was on alert. Asha stopped suddenly, holding up a hand. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her voice tight with unease. Hammond paused and scanned the area, his ears straining for any sound. There it was, a low, guttural growl, faint but unmistakable. Hammond's pulse quickened. In all his years of studying violent ecosystems, he had never quite experienced anything like this. "Stay alert," Hammond said softly. He motioned for the team to fan out in a defensive formation, their weapons drawn, but not yet raised. The growl came again, louder this time, followed by a series of sharp rhythmic cracks, the unmistakable sound of large creatures moving through the jungle, communicating in a language known only to them. It was then they saw them, a pack of large, muscular predators, cloaked in the shadows of the trees. They had the sleek, deadly build of large cats, leopard-like in appearance, but larger and more agile. Their eyes glinted with a cold intelligence, and their bodies were adorned with scars, evidence of brutal survival in a merciless world. "Mountain lions," Asha whispered, scanning her datapad. "But not like any I've seen before." The creatures circled them, their movements calculated, each step deliberate. Their large paws barely made a sound as they padded through the underbrush. Hammond's heart raced. These were no ordinary predators. They seemed too intelligent, too aware of their surroundings. The way they worked together, moving as one, suggested a level of coordination and strategy usually reserved for apex hunters. The lead predator, a massive female with eyes like liquid amber, took a few steps forward, her claws scraping against the soil. Hammond instinctively reached for his communicator, intending to alert the Ithian security team. But before he could issue the order, the pack launched themselves at the group in a blur of motion. The first attack came from behind. A Ithian researcher was dragged to the ground with terrifying speed, the predator's claws sinking into his suit. The Ithian's shield barely managed to deflect the strike, but the predator wasn't finished. It swiftly latched onto his arm, twisting with brutal force. Hammond could hear the crunch of bone, even from a distance. "Fire," he shouted, but his voice was drowned out by the sound of screeching and snarling as the pack descended. Asha fired first, her plasma bolt narrowly missing one of the creatures as it leaped into the trees above them, disappearing into the thick foliage. The remaining researchers opened fire, but it was clear that the predators were moving too quickly, too decisively. "These aren't just animals. They're fighters," Hammond muttered, his eyes tracking the predators' movements. Their attacks weren't random. They were surgical, designed to isolate and overpower. In an instant, it became clear to Hammond. Earth's wildlife had evolved in ways that made them perfect predators. The planet itself was a weapon, and its creatures, from the smallest insect to the largest beast, were all soldiers in an ongoing war for survival. Despite the chaos, Hammond saw something even more troubling. The human soldiers, hidden among the trees, had begun to take action. The humans didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. They were organized, coordinated. A small group moved in from the left, while another approached from the right. They were using Earth's natural resources, traps, smoke signals, and fire, as part of their combat strategy. "They've already learned how to turn their planet's weapons against us," Hammond thought, a cold shiver running down his spine. What had once seemed like an isolated observation of Earth's savage creatures was quickly turning into a far more complex reality. The predators were only part of the story. Humans, too, were becoming part of this deadly ecosystem. The jungle fell silent, save for the distant hum of insects and the slow, methodical breathing of the Ithian team. Hammond, sweat trickling down his brow, slowly turned his gaze to the remaining predators, who now hesitated at the edge of the clearing. The humans had been successful in their attack. 2 of the mountain lions were down, their bodies twitching in the dirt. But there were still others watching, waiting for a moment to strike. "Fall back," Hammond commanded, but before his team could retreat, a massive roar split the air, followed by the unmistakable snap of bone. A large Ithian, who had been caught by one of the predators, was dragged away by its jaws, his shrill screams quickly muffled as the jungle swallowed him whole. Hammond clenched his fists. He had seen the dangers of alien worlds before, but never had he witnessed such a coordinated, brutal response from wildlife. The predators weren't just hunting. They were reacting to an intruder in their territory, a skill honed over centuries of evolution. He looked back toward the humans, who were organizing with military precision. They had adapted to the threat without hesitation, using tactics that reminded him of the most skilled soldiers he had encountered during his years of studying conflict zones. These creatures, They're using traps and environmental cues, Asha said, her voice laced with awe as she observed the humans in action. They're not just surviving, Hammond muttered, his mind racing. They're thriving in this chaos. It was clear now that Earth's creatures had no monopoly on being predators. Humanity, though less physically imposing than the mountain lions or the larger beasts of the jungle, had a powerful advantage: adaptability. Hammond watched as a human soldier, Sergeant Rachel Calloway, led a small squad through the dense foliage. They weren't carrying heavy weapons or relying solely on technology. Instead, they used their knowledge of the land, creating makeshift snares, camouflaging themselves, and moving with military precision. The predators were being outsmarted, not overpowered. Asha turned to Hammond, her eyes wide. "Do you think they've always been this prepared?" "No," Hammond replied, his voice grim. "But they've learned. Over time, they've adapted, using their environment and these creatures to their advantage. I don't think they fully understand it, but humanity has weaponized Earth itself. The animals, the terrain, the very planet. It's all part of their survival instinct." The more Hammond observed, the more he realized the unsettling truth. Humanity was not just a species among others on Earth. They had found a way to make Earth's hostile creatures part of their own survival strategy. Unlike other species, who passively adapted to their ecosystems, humans had learned to manipulate their environment. Where other life forms relied on brute force or innate advantages, humans used intelligence, coordination, and ingenuity. The battle raged on, the sounds of gunfire and animal howls filling the air. Hammond's team took shelter as the humans led the charge, drawing in the remaining predators with calculated distractions and traps. Hammond witnessed something that sent a shiver down his spine. Humans weren't just using Earth's wildlife for defense. They were making it a weapon. They had become part of this living battlefield, not just as survivors, but as its architects. As the dust began to settle, Hammond's thoughts turned darker. This was only the beginning. Humanity had the potential to be far more than just another species in the galactic food chain. The Ethians might have underestimated them, but they had learned one crucial lesson. Humans were not passive inhabitants of Earth. They were its most dangerous weapon. The aftermath of the battle left the clearing eerily quiet. The predators, now subdued, lay motionless, their bodies scattered like discarded trophies. The humans had accomplished what seemed impossible. Without heavy artillery or overwhelming numbers, they had turned the tide of a battle that, only moments ago, had seemed certain to be lost. Hammond could hardly believe his eyes. His mind, trained to catalog and assess, struggled to make sense of what he was witnessing. "These humans, they don't just adapt," Hammond muttered, his gaze fixed on Sergeant Rachel Calloway, who was overseeing the aftermath. She barked orders to her team, calmly coordinating the search for any remaining threats while the others began to dismantle traps and prepare for extraction. They moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine, their every action instinctively synchronized. Hammond's data pad buzzed, but he didn't need it to know what he was seeing. He knew, deep down, that these weren't ordinary humans. They were something more. "Dr. Hammond, you need to see this," Asha called out from behind him. Hammond turned to find her standing over the body of a mountain lion, its chest cavity torn open by a precise shot. She pointed at a small, but significant detail: a jagged wound on the creature's side, as if it had been struck by a sharp-edged tool or projectile just moments before the kill. The pattern was unmistakable. It wasn't just the soldier's firepower that had driven the predators back. Humans were actively engaging in guerrilla warfare, using the environment as a weapon, not just the animals. They were, in essence, turning Earth's predators into both tools and targets in their fight for survival. Humans have weaponized not just the animals, but the land itself, Asha said, her voice steady but filled with disbelief. They are using the creatures of this world like pieces on a chessboard. Hammond felt a chill crawl up his spine. He had come to Earth with the belief that the predators here were simply creatures of nature, ruthless survivors whose violence was born out of necessity. But what he was seeing now shattered that idea completely. Earth's wildlife was no longer just part of the food chain. It had become an extension of the humans' fight for dominance. Hammond's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden explosion in the distance. The Defiant team tensed, weapons raised, as the sound reverberated through the jungle. Sergeant Calloway's team reacted instantly. They had anticipated the threat. The explosion was a diversion, a tactic to draw their attention away from another danger lurking in the shadows. "We're being hunted," Hammond said under his breath. "Not by the creatures, but by them." As the human soldiers regrouped, Hammond realized the terrifying truth. Earth wasn't just a planet of wild beasts. It was a living battlefield, where humans had learned to use its most lethal inhabitants against themselves, manipulating their surroundings and their environment to gain an edge. Humanity wasn't just surviving anymore. They were reshaping the world's order, using Earth's creatures as weapons, and turning the planet itself into a weaponized landscape. The Defiants, so used to being the apex intelligence in the galaxy, had underestimated Earth's most dangerous asset. Not the animals, not even the planet itself, but humanity, the species that had learned to command them both. It was an unsettling thought. If humanity could weaponize Earth, what would stop them from doing the same to the stars? And if Earth was a living weapon, humanity was its architect. The days that followed the ambush were tense and uneasy. Hammond's team had set up camp in a secluded part of the jungle, their communication systems intermittently malfunctioning after the chaotic battle. Yet it wasn't the physical damage that weighed on Hammond's mind. It was the undeniable truth that had become clearer with every passing moment. Earth's wildlife wasn't just aggressive. It had become part of humanity's weapons arsenal. The way the humans moved, coordinated and adapted to the threats of their environment, left Hammond both impressed and unnerved. The Defiant ship, hidden in orbit above the planet, was still functional, but the Defiants could no longer ignore the implications of what they had witnessed. Hammond had sent multiple reports back to their superiors, detailing the intelligence-gathering operations, the surprising nature of human adaptability, and the startling use of Earth's predators in combat. But it wasn't until they observed the human military firsthand that the full scope of their capabilities began to take shape. The Defiant team was transported to a nearby human settlement by a convoy of heavily armored vehicles. As they made their way through the dense forests, Hammond saw signs of the humans' intricate network, hidden paths, traps carefully laid in the underbrush, and even domesticated predators like hounds and falcons used for surveillance. It was a startling sight. They had taken what should have been an unpredictable wild environment and, piece by piece, turned it into something they could control. When they reached the settlement, Hammond was led to a small command center in the heart of the town. The interior was a stark contrast to the lush jungle outside, clean and efficiently organized. Colonel John Montgomery, a grizzled veteran with sharp eyes and a quiet authority, stood waiting. He greeted Hammond with a curt nod, but wasted no time in getting to the point. "We know what you're here for, Dr. Hammond," Montgomery said, his voice low and deliberate. "We've been tracking your presence ever since your ship landed. You didn't think we wouldn't notice something as obvious as an alien ship in our sky." Hammond hesitated. "You've been tracking us," Montgomery smirked. "The jungle may be wild, but we know how to survive in it. You weren't the first alien visitors, and you won't be the last." The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of the situation sinking in. Hammond finally spoke, his voice tense with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "I don't understand. You've weaponized everything. Your environment, your creatures, your tactics. How did you do this? How did you learn to fight like this?" Montgomery's eyes gleamed with a mix of pride and something darker. "Survival," he said simply. "We don't have the luxury of being passive. For us, it's always been about adapting, about learning how to turn our world to our advantage. Earth didn't give us the tools to survive. It gave us the need to survive. We figured out the rest." Hammond felt a chill as the full extent of humanity's transformation became clear. They weren't just using Earth's creatures. They had integrated them into their way of life. It was a symbiotic relationship, a partnership born of necessity. Humans had learned to read the land like an open book, understanding the language of its predators and turning it into a language of warfare. "Your species is unlike any we've encountered," Hammond said, a touch of awe in his voice. "You've transformed Earth itself into your battlefield, and every animal here, every insect, every predator, is a piece in your war machine." Montgomery's gaze darkened. "We don't just fight here, Dr. Hammond. We survive, and we'll do whatever it takes to keep surviving. This planet belongs to us now. And if we need to, we'll turn every single weapon on the universe to keep it that way." Hammond felt the weight of those words sink in. The humans weren't just a species among others. They had become the architects of Earth's future. And now, as the Yethians stood on the precipice of their understanding, they were confronted with a terrifying reality. Humanity's weaponized world had the potential to extend far beyond Earth. In the quiet of the command center, Hammond realized with a cold clarity, this was no longer just about Earth. Humanity had evolved into something else entirely, and the universe, with all its vastness, would soon have to reckon with them. The next few days passed in a haze of tense discussions, data collection, and observation. Dr. Hammond and his team were no longer just scientists. They were witnesses to an unprecedented phenomenon. The Yethians had initially come to Earth to catalog its wildlife and study its ecosystem, but now that task felt trivial. They were witnessing the rise of something much larger, something far beyond their comprehension, a species that had learned to use the planet, to command it, and ultimately, to reshape it in their image. As Hammond walked through the human settlement, his mind raced. The more he saw, the more he realized that humanity's relationship with its environment wasn't just about survival, it was about mastery. The settlement was a fortress of human ingenuity, carefully constructed among the trees, camouflaged from prying eyes. Everything here, from the traps around the perimeter to the strategic placement of lookouts, spoke to a deep, almost primal understanding of the terrain. "You still don't get it, do you?" Ash's voice cut through Hammond's thoughts as she approached, her tone tinged with frustration. "They don't just live here. They're actively molding it to fit their needs. The predators, the terrain, even the weather, they've adapted to it, turned it into tools. They're not just surviving. They're conquering Earth, making it work for them." Hammond sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know. I've seen it, but I'm still trying to understand how it all works. The technology, the tactics, the creatures. It's like nothing I've ever encountered before." Asha nodded, her expression serious. "It's not just about their technology, Hammond. It's their intellect, their ability to understand and manipulate their environment on a level no one thought possible. The Yethians never prepared for something like this. I think they thought Earth would be another garden world, full of passive creatures and ecosystems to catalog. But this place is more like a war zone. And the humans, they're the generals." As Hammond mulled over Ash's words, he was interrupted by a familiar voice. "Dr. Hammond, there's someone you need to meet," came the deep, gravelly voice of Colonel Montgomery. The colonel stood at the edge of the settlement, his face shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "We've set up a demonstration. You've seen our tactics, but now I want you to see what we can do with our living weapons." The colonel's words sent a ripple of unease through Hammond. Living weapons. Hammond followed Montgomery as he led him and Asha through a series of narrow alleyways between the settlement's buildings. At the far end of the compound, a large open area stretched out, surrounded by walls and towers made of reinforced wood and steel. In the center, a massive pit had been dug, the ground below littered with traps, nets, and strange mechanical devices that hummed with energy. Hammond raised an eyebrow. "What is this place?" "This," Montgomery said, pausing to let the gravity of the situation sink in, is where we train, where we teach our soldiers to fight with Earth's creatures, not just against them. As if on cue, the pit erupted with activity. From the far side of the enclosure, a series of massive armored creatures lumbered into view, beasts that resembled giant warthogs, their tusks like sharp iron spikes. They were accompanied by a group of humans, moving in unison, guiding the creatures with gestures and commands that were as natural as breathing. "These are our warhogs," Montgomery continued, his eyes gleaming with pride. "We've trained them to charge and break through enemy lines, to herd and corral larger prey. But they're just one example. Over the years, we've cultivated partnerships with almost every predator on this planet." Hammond watched in awe as the creatures, guided by their human handlers, began charging through a series of obstacles. They plowed through walls of thick bamboo, smashed down fences, and scattered dummies dressed in combat gear. It was an astonishing display, one that showcased humanity's mastery not just over the creatures of Earth, but their ability to use them as active participants in combat. "What's even more remarkable," Montgomery added, "is how quickly these creatures learn. They respond to us, to our training methods, as if they were born to fight. They're not just animals. They're partners. And that's the difference between Earth and the worlds you're used to. Here, we make our own survival." Hammond stood motionless, a cold realization settling in his chest. Earth wasn't just a world of predators. It was a world where humans had become the ultimate predators. They didn't just coexist with the wildlife. They controlled it. And in doing so, they had forged a new kind of warfare, one that extended far beyond simple survival. They were no longer just adapting to Earth's challenges. They were reshaping them. As the demonstration continued, Hammond couldn't shake the growing sense that the humans' mastery of their environment had reached a terrifying tipping point. This was no longer just a matter of earthly warfare. Earth had become a crucible, and humanity was forging a future, one where it was not only the dominant species, but the only species that truly mattered. The demonstration continued with brutal precision, but Hammond couldn't tear his eyes away from the spectacle. He watched as the warhogs, now moving in coordinated formation, slammed into barriers with a ferocity that sent splinters flying. Each movement was calculated, each strike honed through years of training. But what struck Hammond most was the eerie silence between the roars and clashes. The humans, in their focus, acted like machines, each person instinctively knowing their role, responding to the creatures, guiding them with a bond that seemed almost symbiotic. "They're learning more than just survival," Asha whispered beside him. "They're becoming one with their environment. It's as if they can feel the land beneath their feet, understand the creatures in a way that transcends mere mastery." Hammond didn't answer. He was still processing the display, his mind racing through the implications. The humans were no longer mere inhabitants of Earth. They were its apex predators, able to mold, control, and use the very world around them as a tool in their endless drive for dominance. What had once been a planet teeming with natural chaos had now become a world where humanity was the apex force. As the warhogs finished their demonstration, Montgomery turned to Hammond, his face unreadable. "Impressive, isn't it? But this is just one of many tactics we've perfected over the years. We use Earth's creatures not only for offense, but for intelligence gathering, defense, and logistics. Every species here is a potential ally, or a tool." Hammond felt his stomach tighten. "I've seen enough to understand that you've turned Earth into a living weapon. But it doesn't stop here, does it?" Montgomery's gaze hardened, and for a moment, Hammond thought he saw a flicker of something darker in his eyes. "No, it doesn't. Earth is a weapon, yes, but the real challenge isn't controlling Earth. It's controlling what comes next." The Colonel motioned for Hammond and Asha to follow him as he led them down a narrow corridor beneath the settlement. The walls were lined with maps, digital screens, and high-tech surveillance equipment that displayed live footage of various parts of the jungle. Hammond's breath caught in his throat as he realized what they were looking at. Coordinated movements, all across the planet. Thousands of sensors, drones, and animal trackers were feeding data into this central hub. And this was just the beginning. "We've been preparing for a long time," Montgomery continued, his voice low. "What we've done here, weaponizing wildlife, adapting our technology to Earth's ecosystem, it's all been part of a much larger plan, a plan to ensure humanity not only survives but dominates beyond Earth." "Beyond Earth," Asha echoed, her tone incredulous. "Humans didn't stop at controlling the Earth, Doctor," Montgomery said, his eyes narrowing. "Now we're turning our sights on the stars." Hammond stared at him, the weight of the revelation sinking in. "You're telling me you've weaponized Earth with the intention of expanding this domination beyond this planet?" Montgomery gave a grim smile. "Exactly. And we're not doing it alone." The room went still. Hammond's pulse quickened as he realized the magnitude of what Montgomery was implying. There was something more, something Hammond hadn't anticipated. The humans weren't just preparing for war with other species, they were actively forging alliances. The display on the wall flickered, and Hammond's eyes widened as a new set of coordinates appeared, followed by unfamiliar symbols. "Who is this?" Hammond asked, his voice shaking. "This," Montgomery said, "is the future of humanity's weaponized expansion. We've made contact." The implication hit Hammond like a physical blow. The humans weren't just preparing for domination. They had already begun to form alliances with other species in the galaxy. The idea that humans had manipulated their own ecosystem to the point of weaponizing it wasn't just about survival. It was about conquest on an interstellar scale. And if humanity had allies, then the balance of power in the galaxy was about to shift in ways no one, certainly not the Ithians, had ever imagined. In that moment, Hammond realized that the true danger wasn't just Earth's creatures, or even humanity's extraordinary adaptability. The true threat was humanity itself, and whatever alliances they had forged, whatever power they had accumulated, was now pointed directly at the stars. The air in the command center felt thick with tension as the coordinates and alien symbols flickered on the screen. Hammond's mind raced, struggling to keep pace with the implications of what he was seeing. The humans had not only mastered their own planet, they had already extended their reach into the stars. And now, with alliances forming with other species, humanity was on the brink of something far greater than mere survival. It was domination. The Ithian ship in orbit was still sending intermittent signals, but Hammond couldn't shake the feeling that it would soon become irrelevant. The Ithians were not prepared for what they had just discovered. Humans had turned Earth into a living weapon, yes, but they had done more than that. They had harnessed Earth's entire ecosystem, using it to manipulate the very fabric of their survival, and now they had allies who shared in their ambition. Montgomery stood across from him, arms crossed, a dark smirk playing at the edges of his lips. "You've seen what we can do here, Dr. Hammond. You've seen the warhogs, the predatory alliances, the training, but you still haven't seen the real potential we've unlocked. Earth isn't just a weapon. It's the base of a much larger operation." Asha stepped forward, her face pale, her voice shaky. "You're telling us that you've already made contact with other alien species. That's how you've weaponized Earth's creatures." Montgomery nodded slowly, his expression now more somber than prideful. "Yes, it's been a long process, but we've found others, species who share our vision. They understand that, in the vast expanse of space, power is everything. And the best way to gain that power, it's not through technology alone. It's through alliances and through the ability to shape your world, to make it bend to your will. That's what we've done with Earth. And that's what we'll do beyond it." Hammond felt a cold chill run through him. He had always known humanity was resourceful, but what he was hearing was more than just ambition. It was a threat. The Ithians had believed that their intelligence and control over advanced technology would make them the undisputed rulers of the galaxy. But humans had learned a different way. They didn't just adapt to their environment. They made it work for them. "And who are these species you've aligned with?" Hammond asked, trying to steady his voice. Why would they cooperate with a species like humanity? Montgomery's eyes gleamed, and for a moment, Hammond thought he saw a flicker of something darker behind the Colonel's mask of control. "We don't just cooperate, Dr. Hammond. We've learned to negotiate power," Montgomery said, his voice low and filled with quiet authority. "Some species are more coercible than others. The rest understand that our capabilities with Earth's ecosystems, our ability to control, manipulate, and weaponize, give us the edge. And they're willing to trade information, technology, and resources in exchange for that edge." Hammond's stomach churned. The Ethians had underestimated humanity in more ways than he could count. The humans had forged alliances not through diplomacy, but through raw power, both intellectual and ecological. And now they were preparing to take that power beyond Earth. The screen in front of him changed, revealing a schematic of a massive ship, far larger than any vessel the Ethians had ever constructed. Its hull was marked with symbols that Hammond couldn't quite decipher, but one thing was clear. It was a warship, and it was human-made. "That," Montgomery said, his voice heavy with satisfaction, "is our first interstellar vessel. With our alliances in place, we'll be ready to launch in a matter of months. Earth won't just be a launching pad. It will be the core of humanity's dominance across the galaxy." Asha gasped. "You're building a fleet?" "Yes," Montgomery confirmed. "And soon, we'll be ready to take control of the stars." The Ethians may have thought they were the most advanced species in the galaxy, but we've learned the most important lesson. It's not enough to be intelligent. You need to control your environment, dominate it. Hammond's mind reeled. The humans had done more than adapt to their world. They had transformed it into a weapon of unparalleled power, one that could reshape the entire galactic balance of power. With their newfound allies and their rapidly advancing technologies, humanity had already secured a foothold in the cosmos. And they weren't just looking to survive. They were looking to conquer. As Hammond and Asha exchanged a glance, one thought gnawed at them both. The galaxy would never be the same again. The Ethians had underestimated humanity, and now they would have to face the consequences of that mistake.